Welcome back, my immaculate executor. Something extraordinary just occurred that's causing ripples through every expert network in your field. You executed a move so flawlessly, so precisely, so impossibly clean in its execution that observers who've spent decades studying technique are experiencing cognitive dissonance, trying to reconcile what they witnessed with their understanding of skill development. The move wasn't just impressive or well executed, it was technically perfect in ways that shouldn't be possible without specific high-level training that leaves recognizable signatures in how techniques are performed, but you have no such signatures, no markers of any known training lineage, no indication of having studied under recognized masters, which means experts are now asking each other a question that's both fascinating and disturbing. Who trained you in the shadows? What invisible mentor taught you to execute at levels that formal training rarely produces? What secret lineage are you part of that's sophisticated enough to teach this level of mastery while remaining completely hidden from professional communities? The architects have been monitoring skill transmission across civilizations for eons, and they've identified what just occurred as lineage authentication crisis, when someone demonstrates mastery-level technique execution that should only be possible with high-caliber mentorship, but shows no evidence of connection to any known training lineage, forcing observers to question either their understanding of how mastery develops or their knowledge of who's teaching at elite levels in hidden contexts. Most people who achieve impressive skills either learned from recognized masters and show stylistic markers of that training, or are self-taught prodigies whose technique has characteristic imperfections from lack of proper guidance. You've demonstrated neither pattern. Your technique is too polished to be self-taught, but shows no lineage markers from known training systems. Watch what's happening in expert communities. They're reviewing footage of your execution frame by frame, analyzing biomechanics, studying micro-movements, looking for the subtle signatures that reveal training lineage. Every legitimate training system produces characteristic patterns, specific ways of initiating movements, particular breathing rhythms, distinctive weight transfer sequences. These patterns are like fingerprints that trained observers can read to identify who taught someone, even if that person never mentions their training background. You're showing none of these fingerprints. Your technique is sophisticated, but stylistically unidentifiable, masterful but lineageless, polished but containing no readable markers of whose methods refined it to this level. Some experts are proposing you trained with unknown master operating outside professional recognition, someone highly skilled who never sought public reputation, never built formal school, teaches privately to select students. This theory preserves their understanding that mastery requires mentorship while explaining why your technique shows no recognized lineage markers. But this raises new questions. How did you find this mysterious master? Why would a light-level teacher remain completely hidden? What methods does this shadow lineage use that produce technique distinguishable from all known systems? The Shadow Master theory explains your execution quality while creating deeper mystery about what training system you accessed. The truly unsettling element for experts is that your execution wasn't just technically sound. It was optimized beyond what even elite training typically produces. Most masters have slight inefficiencies in their technique, tiny suboptimalities that reveal they're human practitioners who've achieved excellence through years of progressive refinement. You showed none of these human imperfections. Your execution looked machine-precise, algorithmically optimized, containing zero wasted motion or suboptimal positioning. This level of optimization shouldn't be possible, because human training always involves accumulating habits and personal style that creates subtle imperfections even in masters. Your perfect optimization suggests either you've somehow achieved superhuman refinement of technique, or you learned from teacher whose pedagogical methods are more sophisticated than any recognized training system currently operates. Now the architects are analyzing what makes your execution appear so suspiciously clean to expert observers, and they're identifying what they call signature absence phenomenon. Your technique demonstrates mastery-level sophistication while showing none of the identifying signatures that all legitimate lineages produce. This absence is more than just unusual, it's statistically improbable to the point of seeming deliberately engineered. Normal path to mastery inevitably leaves traces, characteristic movement patterns from the training methods used, stylistic preferences from the teaching emphasis, subtle inefficiencies from the order skills were learned. Your technique shows comprehensive mastery without any of these traces, as if someone systematically removed all identifying markers while preserving all functional excellence. Watch what experts notice when they analyze your execution in detail. They identify sophisticated elements that should only come from specific advanced training, timing precision that requires extensive feedback from skilled coach, spatial awareness that develops through particular drilling methods, power generation mechanics that emerge from specialized conditioning. But these sophisticated elements are combined in ways that don't match any known curriculum. Elements from System A are mixed with techniques from System B and refinements characteristic of Approach C, creating hybrid sophistication that shouldn't exist because most training systems don't expose students to multiple contradictory methodologies simultaneously. Some analysts are proposing your synthesis practitioner, someone who trained in multiple systems, extracted best elements from each, integrated them into personal hybrid approach. This would explain the mixed signatures and overall sophistication, but synthesis typically leaves visible seams where different systems meet, awkward transitions between contrasting methodologies, compromises where contradictory principles create tension. You show none of these synthesis artifacts. Your technique flows with seamless unity, suggesting single coherent system rather than cobbled together synthesis. If you are synthesis practitioner, your integration is more complete than synthesis practitioners typically achieve, suggesting either exceptional talent for integration or guidance from mentor who specializes in cross-system synthesis. Others notice that your technique contains innovations that don't exist in any known system, subtle modifications to standard approaches that marginally improve efficiency. These innovations are too sophisticated to be accidental discoveries. They reflect deep understanding of biomechanical principles and extensive experimentation. But innovation normally takes years to develop and validate through trial and error, and you're showing multiple innovations simultaneously, suggesting either you've been experimenting much longer than your apparent age and experience level would allow, or someone taught you these innovations as established techniques within whatever shadow lineage you learned from. A few experts are disturbed by what they call pedagogical impossibility, elements of your technique that contradict each other in ways that should make them impossible to learn together. System A teaches one approach to power generation that's incompatible with System B's approach, yet you demonstrate both competently within same execution. Standard training requires choosing between these incompatible approaches because practicing both simultaneously creates confusion and interference. If you can execute both, either you have exceptional mental compartmentalization that allows holding contradictory techniques simultaneously, or your shadow training used pedagogical methods more sophisticated than standard approaches for teaching students to transcend apparent contradictions between systems. The architects observe that signature absence phenomenon explains why experts are specifically questioning shadow training rather than concluding your self-taught prodigy. Self-taught practitioners show characteristic imperfections from lack of proper correction, inefficiencies they don't recognize, bad habits they've reinforced, gaps in understanding that proper instruction would have filled. You show none of these self-taught markers. Your technique has been clearly refined through expert feedback. Someone caught and corrected the mistakes self-taught practitioners make. Someone provided the detailed guidance that produces polished execution, but that someone left no identifiable fingerprints on your technique, suggesting either deliberately concealed training origin or training from systems so different from mainstream approaches that experts don't recognize its signatures even when viewing its products. Something fascinating is spreading through expert networks now, what the architects call shadow lineage investigation, where professional communities are actively attempting to identify who trained you by investigating your background, tracking your movement history, identifying everyone you've interacted with who might be hidden master. This investigation reflects how deeply your clean execution has disturbed professional understanding of skill development. Experts are investing significant resources trying to solve the mystery of your training origin because your existence without explicable training pathway undermines their confidence in their understanding of how mastery develops and how professional communities track elite-level teaching. Watch the investigation methods experts are deploying. Some are researching your biographical background, looking for gaps in your documented history where intensive training could have occurred, extended periods with limited public activity, time spent in locations known for martial arts or tactical training, connections to individuals with elite-level capabilities who might have mentored you privately. They're essentially treating your development as intelligence, problem requiring investigative techniques to uncover hidden truth about your training. This investigative approach reveals how seriously they take the puzzle. Normal skilled practitioners don't warrant this level of scrutiny. Some investigators are analyzing everyone you've trained with in recognized contexts, hypothesizing that one of these seemingly ordinary training partners might actually be a late practitioner hiding in plain sight. Perhaps your shadow mentor deliberately maintained low profile, training you privately while appearing as casual practitioner in public settings. This theory would explain why you show no connection to famous masters. Your actual master never sought fame and carefully concealed their capabilities from professional recognition. Investigators are reviewing training partners' backgrounds, looking for hidden expertise that might reveal the shadow lineage you belong to. Others are exploring whether you trained internationally in systems unfamiliar to domestic expert community. Perhaps you studied in geographic region or cultural context where sophisticated training exists but remains unknown to mainstream professional networks. This would explain why your technique shows no recognized lineage markers. The lineage exists, but experts investigating you simply don't know that lineage's signatures because it developed in isolation from systems they're familiar with. Some investigators are consulting international experts trying to identify whether your technique matches any regional styles they recognize. A few investigators are considering more exotic possibilities. Perhaps you trained with retired master who's no longer active in professional community, or with underground network that deliberately avoids public recognition, or even with someone who developed unique system independently and taught you privately without ever seeking to establish recognized lineage. These theories stretch into increasingly speculative territory, revealing investigators' frustration at finding no conventional explanation for your training origin despite intensive investigation. The architects observe that shadow lineage investigation reveals how your clean Execution has created professional crisis. If experts can't identify who trained you, it suggests either their tracking of elite-level teaching is more incomplete than they believed, meaning other shadow lineages might exist they're unaware of, or exceptional mastery can develop through pathways they don't understand, meaning their models of skill development are inadequate, or you've somehow concealed your training origin so successfully that investigation can't uncover it, meaning you're more sophisticated than experts who are investigating you. All three possibilities are disturbing to professional communities that pride themselves on understanding their field comprehensively. Your clean execution has created mystery that investigation is failing to solve, forcing experts to question their understanding of expertise, development at fundamental levels. Now the architects are revealing what might be actually occurring. You may have achieved something they call autodidactic mastery through analysis, where instead of learning through traditional instruction from master, you learned through intensive study and analysis of masters' techniques using methods that didn't exist when current training paradigms were established. Modern technology enables learning approaches that bypass traditional mentorship, detailed video analysis, allowing frame-by-frame study of elite technique, biomechanical modeling software revealing optimal movement patterns, machine learning algorithms identifying efficiency improvements that human coaches miss. You might have used these analytical tools to essentially reverse engineer mastery, creating self-guided learning pathway that produces cleaner technique than traditional instruction, because analytical optimization isn't constrained by any lineages, accumulated historical compromises. Consider what analytical self-training enables that traditional instruction doesn't. Traditional master teaches based on how they learned, perpetuating both strengths and limitations of their lineage. Even excellent masters have slight inefficiencies they inherited from their training that they unconsciously pass to students. Analytical learner can study multiple masters simultaneously, identify each master's peak performances, extract optimal elements from each, and synthesize approach that combines best aspects of multiple lineages without inheriting any lineage's limitations. This analytical synthesis could produce technique cleaner than any single lineage produces because it's optimized across multiple examples rather than constrained within one tradition's methods. Watch what analytical approach would make possible. You could study footage of elite performers, use motion analysis software to identify biomechanical patterns, test those patterns through systematic experimentation, refine based on measurable performance improvements, iterate toward increasingly optimized technique. This is essentially applying engineering methodology to skill development, treating technique as system to be analyzed and optimized rather than art to be absorbed from master through apprenticeship. The resulting technique would show no lineage signatures because it wasn't learned from lineage. It was constructed through cross-lineage analysis and optimization. Some sports scientists are recognizing that analytical training approaches are producing new generation of athletes whose technique doesn't match traditional patterns. These athletes use data-driven refinement to discover movement optimizations that traditional coaching doesn't find because traditional coaching is built on accumulated wisdom rather than systematic analysis. You might represent this analytical approach applied with exceptional sophistication to your field, using not just basic video analysis but advanced computational tools that reveal optimizations invisible to human observation alone. Others note that analytical approach would explain several puzzling aspects of your technique. It would explain the missing lineage, signatures. Analytical learning doesn't inherit stylistic markers from master. It would explain the cross-system synthesis. Analytical learner can study all systems simultaneously, It would explain the innovations beyond existing systems. Analytical optimization discovers improvements traditional training doesn't find. It would explain the impossibly clean execution. Analytical refinement eliminates inefficiencies that traditional training perpetuates. All the elements that make experts suspect Shadowmaster. Training could actually result from sophisticated self-training using analytical methods. A few researchers are disturbed by implications if analytical approach can produce mastery. Traditional training systems maintain quality through lineage. Masters, ensuring students develop properly through personal guidance. Professional communities maintaining standards through recognized credentialing. If individuals can achieve mastery through pure analysis without mentorship, it undermines authority structures built around lineage and credentials. It suggests expertise might be more accessible than gatekeeping. Institutions want to acknowledge that traditional lengthy apprenticeship might be inefficient compared to focused, analytical learning, that professional communities tracking of who's qualified might be less comprehensive than they claim. The architects observe that autodidactic mastery through analysis might explain the puzzle while creating new disturbing questions for experts. If you achieved mastery analytically rather than through shadow master, it validates concerns that traditional training might be inefficient and that professional communities might be less essential for skill development than they believe their institutional role to be. But if you achieved mastery through shadow training, it reveals that elite-level teaching is occurring outside professional communities, awareness and oversight. Either explanation is troubling for experts. One suggests their training methods are obsolete. The other suggests their professional awareness is incomplete. Your clean execution has created crisis that investigation can't resolve satisfactorily. Regardless of what truth actually is, the architects are now analyzing what happens as experts fail to identify your training source through investigation, and they're identifying what they call attribution ambiguity, acceptance, the gradual recognition that they may never definitively determine who trained you or how you achieved your capabilities, forcing them to accept that their professional knowledge has boundaries and that exceptional skill can emerge through pathways they don't fully comprehend. This acceptance is psychologically difficult for experts who've built careers on comprehensive understanding of their field, but your continued excellence without revealed training origin is making acceptance unavoidable. Watch how different experts are processing this ambiguity. The pragmatists are focusing on what they can observe. Your technique is excellent regardless of how you learned it. Your capabilities are real regardless of their mysterious origin. Your execution sets new standard, regardless of whether that standard came from shadow, master, or analytical self-training, or some combination experts haven't considered. These pragmatists are incorporating lessons from your technique into their own practice and teaching without needing to solve the mystery of where you learned it. They're treating you as valuable case study rather than puzzle requiring solution. Some experts are experiencing what psychologists call tolerance of ambiguity development, learning to remain comfortable with unanswered questions rather than forcing premature conclusions. These experts acknowledge they don't know who trained you, accept that investigation hasn't revealed training source, remain open to eventually learning the truth while functioning effectively, despite not knowing. This tolerance represents psychological maturity that recognizes expertise doesn't require omniscience, that professionals can operate competently while acknowledging significant gaps in their knowledge. Others are struggling with ambiguity, experiencing persistent discomfort from unresolved mystery. These experts continue speculating, developing increasingly elaborate theories about your training origin, unable to accept that they might never know the answer. Their discomfort reveals psychological need for complete understanding. that reality isn't accommodating. Some mysteries remain mysteries despite intensive investigation. Their struggle illustrates that expertise in technical domain doesn't automatically produce psychological capability to tolerate ambiguity about that domain. A few experts are recognizing that ambiguity about your training is actually strategically valuable for you. Not knowing who trained you or how you developed capabilities makes you more unpredictable, harder to analyze, more difficult to counter. If experts knew your lineage, they could predict likely approaches, identify probable weaknesses, develop specific counters based on understanding your training system. Your ambiguous origin provides operational advantage by preventing opponents from leveraging their knowledge of training systems against you. These experts are grudgingly acknowledging that mystery serves you well even as it frustrates them. The architects observe that attribution, ambiguity, acceptance represents maturation in expert community, recognition that comprehensive understanding is aspirational rather than achievable, that professional knowledge has boundaries that even intensive investigation doesn't eliminate, that exceptional performers can emerge through pathways that professional communities don't track or understand. Your clean execution forced this maturation by creating mystery that investigation couldn't solve, demonstrating that experts' confident belief they could identify anyone's training background was overconfident. The mystery of who trained you in shadows remains unsolved, not because investigation was insufficient, but because the question itself might be based on false assumption that mastery necessarily comes from identifiable training that leaves trackable signatures. If you achieved mastery through pathway that doesn't fit that assumption, then the question of who trained you might be asking about something that didn't happen in form. Experts imagine it. Now something's emerging that the architects call technique reverse engineering attempts. Some experts are abandoning efforts to identify your training source and instead attempting to extract usable lessons from your technique by analyzing what you do rather than how you learned it. They're treating your execution as data source for improving their own teaching and practice, essentially using you as indirect teacher even though they can't identify who taught you. This reverse engineering represents pragmatic response to mystery they can't solve. If they can't learn from your master, they'll learn from you directly by studying what your mysterious training produced. Watch how reverse engineering proceeds. Analysts are creating detailed breakdowns of your technique, frame by frame, video analysis identifying movement sequences, biomechanical modeling revealing force generation patterns, comparative analysis showing how your approach differs from established methods. They're essentially treating you as research subject whose capabilities they're attempting to understand through scientific analysis rather than through understanding your training history. This analytical approach might ironically reconstruct your development pathway. If you actually did use analytical methods to develop, they're using same analytical tools you might have used, just applying them retrospectively to understand your results rather than prospectively to achieve similar results. Some practitioners are attempting to incorporate elements of your technique into their own practice, adopting specific movement optimizations you demonstrate, modifying their approaches based on innovations they observe in your execution, experimenting with synthesis of elements. You combine that their traditional training kept separate. These practitioners are essentially treating you as model to emulate even without understanding your lineage, trusting that copying observable excellence will produce improvements regardless of whether they understand why your approach works. This emulation-based learning is ancient educational method that predates formal instruction, learning by watching and imitating skilled performers. Others are recognizing that reverse engineering has limitations. They can observe what you do but can't fully understand why you make choices you make, timing you use, responses you favor in specific contexts. External observation captures surface technique, but misses internal decision-making, strategic thinking, perceptual processing that makes technique effective in application. Without access to your internal experience or explicit instruction about your reasoning, reverse engineering produces incomplete understanding that might lead to misapplication of techniques. They copy without comprehending their proper context. A few experts are proposing collaborative approach, inviting you to teach what you know explicitly rather than forcing them to extract lessons through analysis. This would give them access to not just your technique, but your understanding of why technique works, how you developed it, when it's appropriately applied. But this approach requires your cooperation, and you might have reasons to maintain mystery rather than revealing training origin or development pathway. Some capabilities are more valuable when they remain partially mysterious, and teaching explicitly would eliminate strategic advantage your ambiguous origin provides. The architects observe that technique, reverse engineering, attempts reveal shift in how expert community is relating to you, from treating you as puzzle to solve, who trained you, to treating you as resource to learn from. What can your technique teach us? This shift represents acceptance that the mystery of your training origin might remain unsolved, while the practical value of your demonstrated capabilities is undeniable and extractable through analysis. You're becoming inadvertent teacher to expert community even without revealing who taught you, creating influence through excellence that observers study and emulate, regardless of whether they understand your development pathway. The shadow training question remains unanswered, but the value of what that mysterious training produced is increasingly recognized through reverse engineering, attempts that extract usable lessons from your impossibly clean execution.